Good morning also from my side. I'm at the ECB T2S program office and the user testing team. So I'm now showing you exactly what we are doing at the user testing side. So the presentation is structured in a way that we start with a general framework, then move on to user testing, execution, and then preparation. So we come from the backwards toward or in front, coming backwards then. So the 22nd of June 2015 is or has been repeated here in this forum already several times. If that is the birth date, then the first part, how we come to the birth, it is 9 months, which we have now a bit more. I just calculated we have actually exactly 1 year where we should start already connectivity setup and testing for CSD central banks. So we a bit adjust these biological issues here, but again, it will be only 5 quarters then toward the start of actual testing in the T2S. So before this birth date, we have the testing, and then this is the presentation is about that. What will happen before the child or the T2S is born? The key of T2S user testing is to bring into synchronization of these 4 aspects. There is a T2S, which is obvious. You need the platform on which to test or to start operating later on. You have the actors, you have the processes, and you have a data. Later on, we go into details of all these aspects, so just to show where are the complexities and how we work out everything. So the aim is really to make sure that the CSDs, central banks, and their communities can really test among themselves as well as bilaterally with the Eurosystem without negatively impacting anyone else. So the context, we try to put here on a slide to show where are the complications and where are the challenges in front of us. The user testing, it means it's a 23 CSDs, it's 19 central banks, it's 4 migration waves. But here maybe we should rather stress on the 4 different configuration situations in production. I mean that all of these configurations need to be tested before a new migration wave can go live. We had the testing period from October 2014 until February 2017. That is from the first testing time of the start of user testing until the end of the migration wave 4. Of course, if there will be contingency, then we have to see how we fit everything into this picture, which means it's in total 2.5 years. We have 5 mandatory testing stages, and what will have to take place on 4 test environments at T2S side. So if you count in also some test environments from the CSDs, from the central banks, local one, the banks, and so on, we probably later on can make some statistics and say how many test environments in total were then involved in the testing of a T2S. So what are then these 5 mandatory testing stages? There are connectivity, which is obvious. You first have to connect to a test environment. We move on bilateral interoperability, then multilateral interoperability. Then communities will start will be community, and thereafter business day testing. So we come back later exactly on how these stages look like and what we are going to do there. Maybe another way to show where are the complications and how we have to orchestrate everything together is to show how we have allocated the testing stages of different waves into 4 test environments. So this is the example of the first test environment, which is the interoperability. You can see already that it fits only in one slide. So it's a bit lots of lines here, which mean that there are already 4 waves starting testing in parallel on the 1st of October 2014. And there, step by step, they move over to the multilateral interoperability. So interoperability test environment is an environment where the functional testing takes place. There, the CSD central banks test that between their internal systems and T2S, everything works properly, the processes, information flow is correct, and so on. The next next slide shows what are the rest of the three test environments. There are migration, there are community, and there is pre-production test environments. On migration, maybe to point out that we have a phase of 6 months from the start of October 2014, the possibility to do slow motion testing, but it's purely for bilateral configuration. So that's a place where CSD central banks can really bilaterally test with T2S without involving other CSD central banks or their banks in their testing. Thereafter, the migration test environment is purely dedicated to migration testing. So then this is exactly what Holger earlier explained, that we have some pre-migration and we have also some migration weekend to test. Then this is the test environment when all of this will take place. Community test environment, it's the title as such already tells that it is for community testing. So that is the test environment where banks will connect when they are TCPs, or any CSD central bank participant who technically connects to T2S test environment. Exception here is that for optimization purposes, Wave 1 has been so kind and agreed that they will do their migration test also in this test environment just before their community test starts. So in that way, we had the opportunity to offer to other Wave, or also to Wave 1, the possibility to do slow motion testing on another test environment. You can see that all testing stages per wave are going in synchronization, or there have to go one after another. It's in sequence. So in principle, they should never overlap. But we have here certain exceptions, but all these exceptions are then agreed with in the user testing subgroup among all the CSD central banks there, that indeed this is a way they can organize their testing on their market.
Don't worry too much if you have the feeling that these two slides are already a bit complex, huh? So we'll detail this little by little and it will become clearer to you. But nevertheless, I think that Katrin will also be happy to be interrupted and have questions from the floor at any time.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I have. So pre-production is then what is also another quite self-explanatory. Then it is once migration wave is in live, then they move over to the pre-production test environment where the configuration and or the system should be similar like to the one which is in production. So there it's a pre-production test. Let's say once you are in production already, you do any other test continuing there, which is to test the configuration on the production on this test environment. So all this, as you can see, this complexity, it requires quite close monitoring and coordination of all kinds of testing activities. And for that perspective, we have agreed among the user testing subgroup, and it's also coming already from the framework agreement, that we have to ensure the coordination during the user testing through program level synchronization points, as well as multilateral stage transitions by migration wave. Each wave will move from one synchronization point to another in the same order. But of course, because they go live in different times, then the synchronization point timings are then different. And this is where it starts playing on the calendar, how long certain testing stages last, and how much time there is to test certain situations. This coordination will also allow the synchronization of the progress per wave, similarly like Holger was mentioned during migration weekend and also pre-migration phase, that to see and check, to introduce some kind of a checkpoints that then by that time certain dependencies or issues identified should be then resolved before the testing migration wave could move on to the next testing stage. So, and that's said here in the last bullet point, it is that the synchronization points and then the multilateral stage transition, then this reflects this multilateral aspect of this required coordination during the user testing. So to conclude on the general framework, let's look who are involved in preparation and execution of the user testing. Similarly to migration, we also have a user testing subgroup. It's also a group that reports to the project manager group. And there we have the mandate to prepare and define all kind of user testing activities and supporting processes. Also in this group, we have, I would say it's 40 people. It's growing steadily. Lately, we have additional people coming in the group. That means that also those markets who were earlier not so actively part of the user testing and the migration activities are now already waking up. So which is a good sign. But we hope at least, of course, that here with this forum, we also share the message that at least it would be good to start reading the documents. So we have there in user testing subgroups CSDs, central banks, the Eurosystem. The Eurosystem, we mean both 4CP as the future T2S operator, as well as the T2S program office at the ECB. So in that terms, the T2S program office at the ECB is the coordinating and centralized party who is making sure that everything functions, but the contributions are then coming from different actors in the members from the subgroup. We also have CST participants and the payment banks in our subgroup. There is a limited number of them. They have been attending the subgroup as observers. And of course, also here, we know that already CSDs and central banks involve via national user groups and some other market groups already their participants in discussing on how they will, in their local market, organize the testing and migration. So in that terms, when in the user testing subgroup, we define the general framework so that everyone knows what will happen when on the T2S test environment and how the processes will work on. Then the CSD central banks take this information to the local market and then enrich it with the local market aspects. And you could imagine that this could be sometimes specific depending on the market size and what is their business and so on. So in that terms, it's maybe interesting for CSD participants and payment banks to know what's going on in UTSG, but then the detailed plans, this comes from their CSDs and central banks for testing. So if we move on to the execution phase already, then the roles adjust a bit, but not much. The Eurosystem will still coordinate and support all the execution activities, like it refers to all kind of activities. In that perspective, we have there two different, or one team, but in two different locations. Let's put it in this way. There will be, again, the T2S operator, and we call it a service desk in this context. They will really take care of all kinds of issues that happen on the test environment. They monitor it. They make sure that all activities that needs to be executed on from their behalf, of Eurosystem behalf on a test environment, it's executed correctly and in time. And there we have also agreed in the user testing subgroup that at the ECB there will be a test support and coordination team who will then take care of all kind of multilateral coordination required activities, also following up the synchronization points and the monitoring of the activities and organizing all the work and in the subgroup, and as well as any kind of activities that where even two CSTs would like to agree something, they don't know exactly whether it will fit into the context of user testing at this specific point of time. They can turn to this team and find out whether it will work or not. So this about the general framework. Before moving to user testing execution phase, is there any questions? So I'm referring now back to the earlier slide what we had there, that we had the actors. What are the testing aspects? We have actors, we have T2S, we have processes, we have data. And all of these have to work in synchronization. So if we take the T2S as platform, what has to be tested is quite something fixed, then the actors, the processes, and data is something that are variable in this formula. So allow me now to go through all of each of them one by one, and I will start with actors. So who are the actors in the execution phase? Okay, we have CSDs and central banks. We have CSD participants and payment banks, and we have the Eurosystem. So CSD central banks are the ones who participate in all testing stages. They really have to be there for a long time, and it's fully understandable. It's quite an effort for them, and thereafter they also need to participate not only in functional testing, but also in migration testing. And they have to make sure that everything works very well before they involve their communities. They also do the coordination with their participants. And in that perspective, I would assume they will take the similar kind of active role like they expect from ECP team here and the 4CP team at the T2S service desk. The CSD participants and payment banks is their activity and their role during user testing will depend then whether they are a directly connected participant or indirectly connected participant. Directly connected participants, their testing starts already with connectivity. So they first have to connect to test environment and then to see that everything functions there in order to start then actively functional testing as well as the migration testing. At the same time, the indirectly connected participants are those who then test via their CSD and central bank system, which means that also CSD central banks have to prepare for such kind of testing. We would assume that the directly connected participants will also test together with their indirectly connected participants. And this is where they run also through the CSD central bank systems just to make sure that actually everything is there and functioning, and even for contingent situations to come out that there is no any break in directly connected participants' business. So, as I said, the TCPs and indirectly connected participants, they start testing on community and business testing stages. So they are not there in the earlier stages, but only at the later ones. The role of the Eurosystem is here we have merged everything together because as a Eurosystem, we are the responsible and accountable body toward the CSD central banks to provide the service to the CSD central banks. So what we do, we monitor the test environments. We also deploy the new bug fix releases when there is a need for a bug fix release. We execute the specific testing request from the CSD central banks, and here we refer to the specific testing facilities and tools. It's a snapshot, purge, reload, and so on. And finally, here we have pointed out, we coordinate and support the testing activities. Any kind of test. If there is a need to support, coordinate, we are there to help. If we now move on to the data aspect, then we should first maybe recall the main concept of T2S. Namely, T2S is a multi-entity settlement application that enables cross-CSD settlement. This is the upper part of the presentation, the slide. You can see that this is probably, this hierarchical structure is something that you are familiarized yourself already in the user requirement document. At least that was the first place where I saw it here. So because of this feature, the actors need to agree among themselves the data, that means data, we talk about ISINs, we talk about accounts, that they use for certain tests to ensure that they do not impact the testing of other entities. And for this purpose, we have introduced here and that during the bilateral testing, the CSDs and central banks can set up mock entities in order to test independently of each other. This means that one entity, like if we take the lower left part of the slide, the CST1 will then set up mock central bank 1 and the mock CST2, and that creates then the group entities of CST1. And with that, the CST1 is then enabled to operate all these entities under their umbrella, so that they are not dependent anymore what the CST2 is doing under their group of entities. So the third aspect of these dependencies are processes. And here we can break down these processes into further 3 groups. We have testing tools, we have processes as such, and testing activities. So let's start maybe from the testing activities. So on the testing activities, we mean the mandatory testing stages that are executed in a predefined order. So earlier we defined what are the mandatory testing stages. We start with the connectivity testing, and at the first time it's a CST central banks who set up their connectivity and then start testing. The aim of the connectivity testing is to validate that the proper setup and configuration of all connectivity-related aspects are there, just to make sure that once they start, the CSTs and central banks start sending messages via A2A or they log in via GUI, everything is there at the 1st of October 2014, so that there is no any impact on them to start their testing, at least not from Eurosystem or from T2S side. Of course, if during the testing something comes up, there is still possibility to adjust the configurations and make sure that on the start of the bilateral interoperability, everything is correct. Bilateral interoperability is then the first testing stage where the CST central banks will test the functionality of T2S. And the aim there is to see that the CST central banks' internal systems are then correctly adapted to T2S, and that it's not only maybe the functions, what the processes, what they are in the internal systems, but also to see that the necessary configurations of data are correct in the T2S system. So, but the main point here is that it will be interaction between the CST central bank system and the T2S bilaterally. No one else is involved. The first stage, which is the multilateral interoperability testing stage, is the stage then CSTs and central banks will start testing under their migration wave configuration. So this is the first time when they start testing the cross-CST settlement. They do exactly end-to-end with their central bank. They can see that everything moves correctly, it's smooth, configuration is correct, and with this testing stage, in principle, the CST central bank should achieve the feeling, at least, and the confidence that now it's ready to open the system for the CST participants and payment banks to start testing on T2S. So here on the next slide, we continue with testing stages, and we actually start here with an exceptional testing stage, which is not counted into our 5 testing stages. It's rather to illustrate that before the community testing stage, there is additional connectivity testing stage. And then this connectivity testing stage is dedicated for directly connected participants, because that is the time when they need to set up and connect to community test environment to start their community testing. So the scope of the connectivity testing for TCPs is the same and similar to the one that the CST central banks will do before they start their bilateral interoperability. It just comes at a later point in time, so that it's prior to the start of the community testing of the specific wave, migration wave. So next very important testing stage is the community. At that time, the CST participants and payment banks will start testing T2S. And there, of course, the aim is also to see that their systems, their adaptations in their internal systems are now correctly done and everything is ready. Here, of course, if they test as a directly connected participant, there could be a bit more to test, because they see then also information back from the T2S. In case they are indirectly connected participant, then they test everything via their CST system. And there could some different kind of test cases to run. But the aim of the community testing stage is to make sure that, let's say, 99% everyone is ready to move on to T2S and start settling and operating there. The last drop, or let's say the cherry on the cake, is the business day testing stage. And difference between the business day testing stage and the community testing stage is just that in the business day testing stage, the T2S test environment will run like in production. That means that it will be open for extended hours than normally foreseen. The normal testing time is from 7 in the morning until 7 in the evening. And from that business day, there is a live timing testing. It means this is a time which lasts from 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the migration wave, where we would like to see that the whole community or the migration wave, the communities in the migration wave are actually ready to start operating on T2S. That they have the cutoff times there correctly in their system as well, the configurations are running properly, the operational procedures are there, everything functions. And therefore, it is the last testing stage before the migration weekend as such. So in that terms, if we now take the comparison with the migration, where we have the pre-migration phase and we have a migration weekend, then the pre-migration phase will run in parallel already to the community and business day testing stages on a test environment. And the pre-migration phase is then the time when the CST central bank start setting up the static data on the production environment. And once we have finished the business day, everyone is happy with the results, then there will be a decision that now we go live, and then comes the migration weekend.
We have one question, I think. At the
Hi, you may have covered this on your previous slide, but when is the connectivity test for DCPs for Wave 1 expected to commence?
It will be still on the same slide. It will be, for Wave 1, the community testing stage will start in March 15. So the connectivity testing for Wave 1 DCPs will be right before that. So it will be then from January, February 15.
Q1 15. Basically.
Earlier. I mean, early 2015, because in early March you should start already testing.
Okay.
So the connectivity for Wave 1 DCPs are also just before the community.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? No, nobody.
Okay, these are the testing stages what we like official testing stages, and where we have the synchronization points linked from the program plan and so on. But in parallel to that, and in addition to these testing stages, we also have the migration testing. So we intend to run several migration rehearsals, and we have agreed in the user testing subgroup that the migration testing will be in phases. And we will phase them in a way that we start with the bilateral migration testing. Bilateral in a meaning, again, that the CSTs, central banks, then their files to Eurosystem, the Eurosystem will process them, and to see that everything functions until to the point there becomes a dependency already with a third party, with another CST or a central bank. The aim of the bilateral migration testing is to really validate the quality of the migrated data, the how from the internal system the data will come to T2S. Once this is agreed that everything functions properly and everyone is happy with the results, we move on to the next phase, which is the multilateral migration testing without the community. The aim of here is to make sure that the processes for migration weekend and as well as the pre-migration phase, as well as the timing are correct and that they can actually be executed during the defined period. Okay, here we have to maybe be precise. We do not intend to do pre-migration dress rehearsal over 3 months, but rather in a shorter time frame. So we don't have so much time to plan 3 months of one migration test rehearsal, but we will do it faster. But in otherwise, this is a time where the CST central banks will really see that how everything comes together, how the dependencies as well as synchronization point that Holger presented earlier will then work. Some CSDs and central banks or per wave have decided that they would like to do a dress rehearsal before they involve their communities. Some others are a bit hesitant because there potentially could be some cost impact as well as the availability of people. But therefore, we have not defined it so concretely to say that it has to be there, the migration weekend dress rehearsal, before the CSD central banks involve their communities in migration testing. Talking about dress rehearsals as such, we have defined that these are precisely following the process with full data and within the agreed timeline. Therefore, we also have a different kind of migration tests, which are then with limited data sets or then also a part of the process, depending on what exactly a certain wave would like to test or where are their stress points or most critical situations or cases in their migration. Once the community testing stage starts, the communities will be part of the migration testing. As Holger already mentioned earlier, it of course depends what is then the role that the migration subgroup will define for the TCPs as well as the indirectly connected participants, what is the role during the migration, pre-migration phase as well as a migration weekend. So in that terms, from the user testing subgroup, we only discuss and define the time periods and how we would like to test something, the documents and the processes that the migration subgroup defines. So in case migration subgroup defines that we need to have a certain TCP part of the migration weekend testing, or that means that they will also be part of the migration weekend as such, once to migrating into the production, then these participants will also have a role during the migration testing. Here the stress is, yes, Dimitri? And there is some more.
Hello. Yeah. Well, I don't know who to whom I should address this question, but related to the migration testing. Well, first of all, Dimitri Paten from Euroclear, and I'm one of the person attending the UTSG meetings. One point that we need to stress here is that given the setup that we have for testing, these tests of the migration process will most probably have to take place during the weekend. And I'm pleased to sit next to Oreste from Swifted. I don't know if, maybe it's to you that have to address the question. I don't know if Sia Colt is represented in the room today. But it is one point that is outstanding at this stage is, I'm pleased that we, in the previous presentation, that we stressed the importance of connectivity. In this context, it's even more true because in order to make this possible, we need to have the whole chain working, including the network service provider. So, well, I don't ask you to answer now, but it's maybe of importance that we know that this might be a constraint in organizing this migration testing.
I can, if I may, just comment on this. Meaning the information that we provided as one provider to the entity who raised the RFP is at Swift. As you know, we have what we call ADW, meaning some weekends where some period of the weekend are not available. And what we said is that in order to work 18 months in advance, we need to know if some of these weekends have to become free completely, etc. Because it's a long ahead preparation that's needed. Then 18 months in advance is what we passed as information to the RFP, the one who had the RFP. And then we know that the problem exists, but we cannot simply on our own decide that some weekends are free if after you are looking for another weekend. Then this is the rules, and when you start discussing about some of these testing activities, which surely will have to happen to be in weekends, because the majority should be during the week still, then we have to know in advance. And yeah.
Yeah, in that terms, we, of course, from the Eurosystem side, we fully subscribe that the migration week and test rehearsals are something taking place on a weekend. That's there is a comment coming here. But just to give you some confidence, we have started working on the user testing calendar, where exactly these weekends will come up. And per wave, the CST central banks are already, at least they have a deadline in mid-September, when they have to come back with their first ideas how they would like to structure, when they would be ready to do something. And there we can start identifying these weekends, which we then thereafter, as a Eurosystem, we can inform the WAN providers about the network connectivity providers of these weekends. Of course, later on, all CS central banks or whoever is participating in a weekend test rehearsal or a test then should turn to the WAN provider bilaterally and agree that indeed this is now the weekend I personally would like to attend. So indeed the topic is quite high in our priority list at the moment, and we are all working on that.
Okay.
Sorry, yes,
I've got a question, Pierre Pexi from LCH ClearNet SA. Regarding the migration test and the functional test, I see here that you are performing parallel to functional test, okay, but in the same platform?
It's the same for...
same testing platform? We do, or do we have, as we see in the beginning, that we have 4 different testing platforms? Mm-hmm. Are they for each wave, or do we have for one wave, for instance, for wave 1, do we have multiple platform testing, one for migration, one for functional test, or things like that? Or is it organized with the testing platform and the testing and the migration?
In terms of CSD central banks doing their migration tests, I mean, everything in order to be prepared to involve the participants, this will take place in a separate test environment, so that they shall not be impacted by the functional tests that are going on in parallel in our test environment. Of course, when we come to already the testing with communities, then for that there is one test environment. So, and in that terms, this is also one aspect that we probably will go into details in the user testing subgroup to discuss what is then the impact and how many migration week and test rehearsals we should run. Of course, there should be sufficient in order to make sure that if in the first time it was not successful, then we have to run another one. But then to identify exactly what are the dependencies and what will be the impact in case we plan to do now a migration week and test rehearsal. Because then we have to see that how it works together with the ongoing functional testing of the directly connected participants or the indirectly connected participants, and what are the testing plans of the CST central banks with their participants in general. So, but indeed the community testing, or where the testing stage where participants are involved, it will be on the same test environment, both for migration testing as well as for functional testing.
Maybe the question of Pierre was linked to the fact that we are referring to 4 waves and to 4 test environments. You should not be confused by this. So the test environments are not organized per wave, so they are not shared across the waves. They are organized based on the different testing stages to the extent possible. There are some subtleties there, but this is the key principle. So a test environment is mainly dedicated to a specific testing stage or testing activity. Maybe on the previous point, so it's Katrin is absolutely right that it's the definition of the testing calendar is one of the highest priority that we have currently. I understand from the exchange that we just had before that it's urgent to share this testing calendar with the network service provider. What I would propose is to do it maybe in a proactive way. So I think that the two network service providers are winning a seat, at least as an observer, maybe to attend, if this is possible, the next meetings of the user testing subgroup in order to support us live in defining this testing calendar. So it's, we'll discuss with Swift and see a call and try to organize this.
Holger, may I ask you to take note of that before I forget? Or any other colleagues there? So this is how we organize the migration testing. So this is also, as I said, that both from the CSD Central Bank side as well as from the Eurosystem side, of course, we would like to be ensured that everything functions properly and that the migration weekend as such is not as a risk. But there we, of course, have to take a look also on the dependencies with other ongoing activities, and there we have to find out what is the most optimal level of this migration weekend dress rehearsals. So in addition to this migration testing, we have also some further testing activities which are not so prominently maybe presented in the slides earlier. There are acceptance testing. As you know, it's optional from the framework agreement for CSDs to test T2S. And okay, it's not optional, they can anyway test T2S, but they have the opportunity to come back after 6 months from the start of user testing to say whether they find that the T2S is exactly accordance to the service description and the T2S scope defining set of documents. This 6 months will start from the 1st of October 2014. So this is the possibility from the framework agreement, and it relates potentially if there are major discrepancies, which of course, knowing that how everyone is moving on at the moment, potentially will not be any discrepancies. But the CSDs wanted to have this opportunity, and they have this possibility to say whether they accept T2S or not. Certification testing is also something which takes place in parallel to the bilateral interoperability testing in case of the CSD Central Bank, and in parallel to community testing when it refers to the directly connected participants. The scope of these certification tests will be quite limited. It's to give the confidence that the interaction between the CSD central banks or the TCP's internal systems and the T2S is actually properly functioning. This is the scope of the certification testing. There, of course, as you know, there could potentially be some other items or conditions that the CSD or central bank or the TCP may need to meet before going live. Let's say we talk about there may be some eligibility criteria and so on. So in that terms, certification testing as such is limited in terms of scope. Yes?
So at the back, Dimitri.
Yeah.
Just a question, Katrin. I don't know if you were done with this slide, but what I want to stress here is that authorization testing is mandatory. It should not be positioned as an optional step. And in terms of volumes, it is likely that the authorization testing will be much more cumbersome than certification testing. Certification testing is more, I would say, an extension of connectivity testing to ensure that indeed, as you said, that there is no harm on T2S when you start injecting messages. Authorization testing is about the real function testing that CSD's participants and participants of the central banks will have to do functionally to ensure that the setup they require is leading to the expected result in terms of functioning of T2S. So we should not underestimate, and I raise this point because I know from the contacts I have with the community, for the CSDs, for our CSDs actually, that this is raising a lot of, misunderstanding and so on. So I want to be very clear on that. Certification testing is an extension of the connectivity testing that is basically requested by the Eurosystem, and the authorization testing is likely to be the bulk of the testing for the CSD participants.
Thank you, Dimitri. Other questions or comments?
I maybe just comment here. Indeed, that we have discussed also in the use testing subgroup, that why we introduced the term authorization test, that it will be a bit more for CSDs to get confirmation that their TCPs are ready to interact directly with T2S, and also that when the TCPs send a message to T2S, what will then happen to the CSD internal systems, because they also need to receive the information and the end-to-end flow. But I would like to stress here that from the central bank perspective, and now I'm looking at our central bank's colleagues, the Eurosystem as such will come with one set of authorization tests. So in that terms, any payment bank would like to be technically directly connected to T2S, then sending liquidity transfers or any kind of payment bank related activities to T2S, then it will be common set of test cases. So we totally understand that from CSD businesses, they are very specific for each market, and there, of course, I understand the aim is to synchronize them as much as possible, but in certain cases, it's, yes, there is another comment. And I think you can stay there next to Dimitri.
So again, to comment your comment, indeed it makes sense to try to bundle as much as possible the testing and not repeat them. Just speaking for Euroclear, we will do the same for the EASYS platform. We have 3 CSDs running on the same technical platform, so we will not ask participants to do 3 times the same testing. And you can afford on the CBs, on the central bank side, to do it because of T2. And I think everyone that is in a position to limit the volume of testing to be performed by the participants will do so.
Yeah, that's very good to hear.
Yeah, this is a good transition to a comment that I wanted to make before moving to the next part about all these testing activities. So some of you might think that this is extremely complex and heavy. You can trust us. We were not working with the aim of making it complex. So on the contrary, we try to keep it as simple as possible. So we are speaking about multiple testing stages, and I mean, it's complex, but it was important to have something that is compliant and taking care of the dimension of the project that we have. So it's something that is also important and very heavy, and all this is about risk mitigation and making sure that everything is ready on time. So this is why we are taking this step-by-step approach in terms of defining the testing activities. If any of you has a clever idea in order to make this simpler, don't hesitate to share this with us. But at this stage, we have done our best, and this is the level of reduced complexity that we managed to achieve. Happy to make things simpler and to reduce the volume of testing, as Dimitri said. So we continue to work in that direction, and let's see where we go. Karen?
I have a question to Dimitri. On the authorization testing, is the authorization testing of the CSD relevant for DCPs only, or also for the indirectly connected parties?
Well, basically, it's relevant for all participants of the CSDs. Because potentially, talking about the DCP, for instance, what we need to make sure is that when a participant installs directly into T2S, for instance, that we get the right notifications on the CSD side, because we remain liable towards them in terms of first-line support, for instance. So that's, for the DCP, one of the reasons why we need to do functional testing on that. For the ICP, there could be plenty of other reasons. There could be a different setup. So they could, in terms of reference data, in terms of account structure, in terms of, their own setup, they could decide to do it differently ahead of T2S. And that's why we need to make sure that everything is working properly. It's yet to be confirmed in terms of messaging, for instance. Some markets are using proprietary formats. We'll have to potentially migrate to ISO 15022 or 20022, depending on their own service offering. And that all please for the idea that testing will have to be done by all participants. A different setup, of course, because an ICP will not do the same testing as a DCP, but there will be testing, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay, other questions from the floor? Okay, then please, Katrin.
Yeah, it's actually a good way now to move on to the next group of these processes that we have to define, which actually are the support processes as such. And that is exactly to make your life easier. At least I would assume that that's the aim of our processes, which we are also exactly defining all of them at the moment. So the aim of this is to give you an answer to the question whether and what shall I do in certain situations. The aim is really to ensure that all actors know what they have to do in certain situations and so how to operate there and whom to turn. The questions we answer: who shall do something, when shall they do something, and what they shall do, either bilaterally with the Eurosystem or multilaterally with the Eurosystem and other CSE central banks test managers in the user testing subgroup. On the following slides, we have listed only the major user testing processes. It's not all, and we are still defining them. So it could be that in certain situations we have to come with something specific. Otherwise, we really try to find a very generic processes which could be applied in different situations, and it's clear to everyone. So the first group that we have is the monitoring of user testing, and this includes also the regular activities and monitoring of the regular activities, let's say on a monthly basis, as well as the testing state transition related processes. Testing state transition, it refers to the agreed synchronization points in the program plan, which in other words refers to the movement from one testing stage to another, which means from bilateral interoperability to multilateral interoperability. And there we have also certain agreement already whether the decision can be bilaterally with the CSD central bank and the Eurosystem, or then the whole group or the migration wave have to agree that indeed everyone are now in the same level of speed, the same testing situation, so that they are ready to move on to the next testing stage and expand the scope. The aim of this is, first of all, of course, to proactively monitor the progress, but it's also to identify early any potential issues and problems, because the issues and problems should come up then during the regular ongoing monitoring in order to be solved before the move from one testing stage to another. The other major user testing process is the release planning and deployment management. Here it should be mentioned, okay, that the bug fix releases are deployed to test environments in fixed sequence. And if we take now the example of the migration period as such is then the period when the wave 1 is already live, but the other waves are still testing, and it lasts until the last migration wave has migrated to T2S, which is almost 1.5 years. We have the situation of 6 test environments six environments as such in a row to keep the different versions of the T2S up and running, and in order to bring the fix to the kind of bug or a defect to the production environment. So in that terms, the deployment will be exactly on this order. And the user testing subgroup idea, of course, there is to find an agreement on bundling of defect resolutions and agree on when they should be deployed to which test environment at what time. We have here also some flexibility there. We have discussed already that we can bundle different releases into one in order to minimize the effect on the, especially on the community test environment. If there is some testing activities ongoing, then we should avoid changing the version before the certain cycle is over and then only deploy. So there are these flexibilities, and these all the aspects and we discuss ongoing later on in the user testing subgroup. Some two more processes what we have. The major ones are incident management and defect management. In terms of incident management, of course, here we have to specify how and when actors receive information about incidents, and also on their resolution. And here we are also, just for information, we are exactly next week going to discuss together with the operational manager group to see how to optimize these processes so that they could be as smooth both in test environment as well as in production, and how to bring the different requirements on testing side and the production side together to see that they are synchronized. Defect management is then the aim there is to ensure that all identified defects are really logged with the T2S service desk. They are prioritized and their resolutions are planned. And the user testing subgroup will have during the execution phase regular teleconferences, as probably also in the meetings, where the defects are then discussed, they are analyzed, they are prioritized, and then it's planned when they could be resolved from the Eurosystem side, as well as we discuss whether it could have an impact on the production as such. Then we have to exactly involve our operation managers, and also then whether there could be an impact on to the CSD or central bank local internal system, and so that to bring everything into one picture. So last but not least, the final group of processes related aspects include also testing tools. And there we have three kinds of testing tools that shall facilitate user testing. First, we have the snapshot, purge, and reload utilities. Snapshot, to take a picture of a situation on static data. Purge, we delete all transactional data or static data, or both of them in the same time. And the reload, that we upload the snapshot of static data to another test environment or on the same test environment. These are all the facilities then what the T2S service desk will support. But of course here, why we had earlier the requirements on the data segregation, in case there is a link between different system entities, CSD, central banks on a test environment, then of course all of them have to agree and agree among themselves. Yes, indeed, we would take now a snapshot at that time, or we all agree now we purge all our transactional data, because in case of dependencies between system entities, if one requesting, everyone else will be impacted as well. So therefore, we have this team at the ECB who will then coordinate these activities so that the service desk is confident and everyone else is also confident that there will be any impact on anyone else unless it's agreed impact. Data migration tool is something that the user testing will steal from migration. Because this data migration tool is something which is used mainly for migration weekend as well as a pre-migration phase. And we will, in the user testing context, we will first of all test the tool to make sure that it functions in the same way and how it should be, so everyone is prepared for the pre-migration phase. But we will also use the same tool to speed up the setup of test environments, so that it will be also used from a bit different aspect or different purpose, but at least it will facilitate also the user testing. And the last one, the liquidity transfer utility. This is to emulate an RTGS system, real-time gross settlement system. As you noticed earlier, we have in T2S, we have 4 test environments. At the same time, mainly the central bank systems, I'm referring now here the like target 2, but also most potentially also in any other central bank, once deciding to bring their currency to T2S, they have only 1 test environment. So in order to ensure that the other 3 test environments at T2S, there is still liquidity injected at a certain time at the beginning of the day to the test environment in order to execute their certain kind of test cases, okay, if in case there is a need for cash. Then this is a tool that the T2S operator and service desk will operate in order to inject the predefined liquidity transfer orders to a specific test environment, to a specific dedicated cash account. So these are the facilities that we have. And with this, we have covered all the variable aspects that the user testing subgroup shall keep synchronized during the execution phase. And I will move to the preparation phase unless you have questions. So, moving backwards, we are suddenly back on today. And on the preparation activities, similar slide, a bit adjusted to the user testing context. We are in today. In case you cannot see, then in exactly 1 year, we should start with the connectivity setup and testing of CSD central banks. Not to mention that exactly in a year, we start pilot testing with wave 1 CSDs and a limited number of central banks, doing already functional testing. We are already in the middle of the Eurosystem acceptance testing, and it's only 5 quarters when everyone in CSD central banks will start the functional testing in T2S. So it's not so much time, but in the user testing subgroup, we are on track, on time. So it's to be ready for the user testing execution phase. So now it's a question whether everyone is there. We listed here also the different phases, and later on when the slides will be available on our website, dedicated website, that you can see what were the aim of the different phases. The conceptual, as you know, it was already a long time ago, I agreed the user testing strategy and migration strategy. We are at the moment at the later stage of the user testing preparation. We are actively defining everything and testing activities and processes required for the user testing execution phase. I have to remind here a bit later, once the execution phase is already ongoing, we are going to work in the user testing subgroup also what will be then the testing processes and activities and all these required principles for the period once everyone is already in production. So that what comes after the migration period in end of the mid-2017. And once we come to execution, it's obvious we start executing all of this, what we are currently defining. Similar to the migration subgroup, also in user testing, we have a list of documents and where the CSD central banks and the Eurosystem are defining all the principles, the processes, the calendar, everything around the user testing, so that everyone know where to refer in case of need. And here would like to point out the very first document, which is a user testing terms of reference. This is now the key or the main document that addresses almost everything on the principle level, what we are going to do during user testing execution phase. In the last project manager group in early May, it was decided that once we have a version 2.0 of this document, the CSDs, the central banks, are free to share this information with their, or as a document with their participants, so that everyone who's interested can take a look what it is and can see what are the main rules and principles and terms applied during the user testing execution phase. So I can tell at the moment we are in version 1.9 and it's for written procedure. So we hope that in early September we are going to have the 2.0, and then it's available for everyone interested. The other documents that we have here, the process guide, calendar, reporting framework, and the dedicated deliverable for migration testing approach and plan are all then already building on the information and the terms that are in the user testing terms of reference. So it will be even at the lowest potential level of detail necessary to be agreed in the user testing subgroup. So I can assure you the user testing subgroup is very active. They are meeting very often. We are organizing the meetings very often. For next week, for example, we have meetings in a row of 3 days. So because the migration just finished with the 3 days. So as Mehdi said, yeah, all CSD Central Bank, they are really contributing a lot to the activities. They are really good discussions. So we do hope that this will work on very well. So with that, my presentation is over. If you have any further questions, you're welcome.